Gilbo here, Jake Gilbo 11, taking a look at some GPP bets for tonight's slate. Overall, we have a fair amount of good pitching, but in below average spots. It kind of cancels each other out a little bit, so it's going to be an interesting night to see where people gravitate towards. I like going up against some of the better pitchers tonight in a GPP fashion because you can exploit some weaknesses here. Like Pineda's home run issue with some of these Houston bats. Obviously, we can still look towards cores. We can still gravitate towards some of the higher games like Chase Field, Minnesota, Chicago, which is a good spot for offense. Texas has one of the higher totals on the night, 2 weak lefties. So jumping into it here, we can definitely look at that Texas game for some two catchers. Granted, they're behind the dish. Look at Robinson Chirinos against Clayton Richard. Richard's been awful against right-handers this year, 418 WOBA, allowed 36% hard contact rate, 1.57 home runs per 9. Chirinos is definitely in play here if he's behind the dish, has had solid numbers against lefties in his career. In that same one, Austin Hedges gets another weak lefty there with Perez in a good ballpark. Perez ground ball right down a little bit against right-handers, which makes him an intriguing option. 3.38 WOBA to right-handers, allowing a fair amount of hard contact as well, 36.5%. So those two guys are definitely in play for me. Cheaper, they're not going to kill you cost-wise. Good ballpark there, a lot of home run potential. I'll definitely be going that direction. If you're looking for a high-price guy, yes, Money Grandolph, he's behind the dish. You might find someone else there as well, just depending on what the Dodgers do with that lineup. It may be Austin Barnes hitting the bottom of that lineup, so we'll see. But for the most part, I think they're both a little too expensive. I think mainly paying down with those two catchers is really where I'm looking at to go tonight, just because I don't want to pay up for a Buster Posey against Bronson Arroyo in a bad ballpark. Evan Gattis, he's not one of the guys I'll be looking at just because he's a little too expensive for a catcher. Gary Sanchez in a tough spot as well. So I think for the most part of the Texas games where I'll be looking, maybe a Brian McCann, going back to his old stomping grounds there in Yankee Stadium, always hit for a high ISO there. He'd probably be the other one that I'd take a shot on. Moving on to first base, Mark Reynolds definitely in play here against Ryu, who 352 WOBA to righties, 2.37 home runs per 9 so far, is missing a good amount of bats and inducing a good amount of soft contact. I think eventually things will work out for Ryu, but probably not tonight. Reynolds definitely has that big power, has been hitting really well, so I'll be looking to go his way tonight. Will Myers is another one. Already mentioned Perez, but Myers absolutely crushing the ball this season. Around a 200 ISO against lefties over the last season and a half. Been one of the consistent options at first base. I don't mind paying up for that price tag. As far as other guys, Cody Bellinger, his price didn't really move. He's only 3,600. I know he's lefty on lefty tonight, but it's hard to put anything past this kid right now. I'll certainly be looking his way. Cheap guys, Kenneth Vargas is interesting against Holland, who's given up a crazy high hard contact and fly ball rate to right-handers. Vargas over a 200 ISO against lefties since last year. A little bit boom or bust, but I definitely don't mind going to that game for some offense, and Vargas is certainly cheap. So second base, definitely a spot where you can look to kind of pay down at a little bit. Solarte, only 3K against Perez. I don't mind him. Solarte, decent numbers against lefties, 180 ISO going back to last year. Still on the cheaper side, going to be hitting in the middle of that lineup, so he'll definitely be fun to use. DJ LeMahieu, price didn't really go up. Over 400 WOBA going back to last year against lefties, only 3,400 on FanDuel. Definitely not a bad price tag for him at all. 49 on DK, that's very expensive, but for the price of LeMahieu on FanDuel, I think he's a solid upside play at that price. Usually I'm not a big fan of his, but that's because usually he's about 3,900. So getting a little bit of a discount, I'll definitely be going that way tonight. Chris Taylor, I know he's bumped up. He's had a couple of decent games of late, but a little too expensive for my taste, even being in cores. Brian Dozier's questionable. He would be in a good matchup tonight, but keep an eye on him if he's in the lineup. We're at third base. You have your cores options in Nolan Arenado, Justin Turner for obvious reasons. Miguel Sano, though, about a full $1,000 cheaper going up against Holland. Holland definitely a guy where I think people are going to be maybe rolling out some SP2s. Talked about that possible usage there, but he's been riding lucky. I mean, like I said, fly balls, hard contact, all up high. That kind of sets up for Miguel Sano for big power at basically 1,000 cheaper than what we're looking at Turner and Arenado. So I definitely don't mind going to him. As far as other guys go, I mean, I'm not particularly thrilled. Eugenio Suarez, bad ballpark, but on the cheaper side, going up against a lefty, 386 WOBA against lefties going back to last year, 250 ISO. I wouldn't mind Suarez or Eugenio Suarez there in a GPP, even with the bad ballpark. Going to get some lower ownership, still some potential for a gapper as well. So I'll certainly be looking at him. As far as cheaper guys go, it's kind of tough. I mean, Josh Harrison's a guy we've been considering. Not particularly thrilled with him tonight. Christian Arroyo, you can take a look at if you want, going up against Bronson Arroyo. But outside of that, that's pretty much it. Shortstop, Carlos Correa, I like quite a bit here. Should draw some low ownership, starting to come around really. 370 WOBA against righties, going back to last year, 181 ISO. Mentioned Pineda with his issues with home runs. Has allowed 4 already this season, 2.0 home runs per 9. I like him as a contrarian option tonight. As far as other guys go, I mean, Elvis Andrus is in consideration, 380 WOBA against lefties going back to last year. Jorge Polanco, I don't mind, 372 against lefties going back to last year. So there are some cheaper options you can use. I think a balanced approach is pretty intriguing tonight, and Andrus and Polanco kind of fit the bill there. If you're looking to really dive down, there isn't a ton that we really like. I mean, Jordy Mercer's not facing a lefty. No one's really cheap unless Defoe steps into the lineup. I mean, there's no real guy that you can really consider cheap down there. So Andrus and Polanco are two guys that you can take a look at for the most part. So outside of that, I mean, looking at outfield, a lot of different ways. I mean, Coors is certainly in play. Blackman, I don't mind. Ian Desmond, obviously going to be high upside guys. Yasiel Puig, depending on where he's hitting in the lineup. But there's definitely other ways you can go here. Pollock, David Peralta, intriguing because they will run. Garrett Cole does allow quite a bit of stolen bases. As far as other options, I mean, it's going to be a night where I think you look a little bit down a little bit more. Kike Hernandez is an intriguing option. You can use him at shortstop on DraftKings, which is nice. Outfield on FanDuel, 3,400 is not a bad price tag for him. Right-handed bats for Texas, Delano Shields, Carlos Gomez, certainly in play for GPPs. Already have kind of talked about that game quite a bit here. And then if you're looking lower, I mean, Carlos Beltran back in the lineup there. I don't mind him going up against his old team in that ballpark, which is very friendly for lefty power. Going to have some definite interest there. Seth Smith, sneaky play, starting to come around here, going up against AJ Cole, who has struggled a little bit with lefties in his career. I think there's some upside there at a cheaper price, and you get that nice mid-range value. So I don't mind kind of paying down in this, lower range, mid-range for outfield tonight with guys like David Peralta, Melky, Delano Shields. I mean, there's definitely some upside there. And also keep an eye out for some punts. If they pop up in the lineup. So let's wrap things up here. You can head over to DaveFantasyCafe.com for our great tools and content.